Saturday, 28th of January 1984. The Saturday preliminaries before the pageant on Sunday, Sport and Vintage Aviation's Vintage and Classic pageant. This aircraft, of course, is John Pheasant's Tiger Moth, and here's an ultralight being assembled, ready for display. Many aircraft arrived on the Saturday, and the weather was, as you see, perfect. A gaggle of Tiger Moths and being ready for competitions which the Tiger Club held on the Saturday. Many aircraft arrived on Friday afternoon in very blustery northwesterly conditions up to 45 knots, and 2 rows of press ganged members held these aircraft as they came into land. Very old Cessna 180 ex-top dresser BUG has spent some of its time in the Warrap, now privately owned in the north. Trevor Sampson filling his Jodel D9. Stuart Tantram's part of the Foxpine Flying Circus. He'll be leading the front aircraft, and the aircraft behind him will be flown by John Lanham.
A general view of the aircraft as they arrived on Saturday. That is the Volks plane belonging to John Shakes from Carterton.
And so your commentators today are Jeff Griffith speaking now, and
Doug Donaldson, Vice President of Sport and Vintage Aviation Society. The weather here today is beautifully fine, and of course we're looking for these type of conditions over the weekend. There we have John and Victoria Lanham, all set to go from the Foxpine Flying Circus. And John is also a member of Sport and Vintage and flies our Harvard very capably, and he'll be taking part in the main part of our air pageant tomorrow.
very interesting part of the display here, Doug, was the vintage military vehicles, which are immaculately prepared and put on a very, very good static display, don't you think?
An excellent display, Jeff. These fellows are really devoted to their task of restoring these vehicles, and they're in mint condition.
Certainly are. There's Jeff Sayers and Dave Atkinson doing the preparation for a practice run on the Saturday.
And there again a shot of the military vehicles. They had all types of vehicles, gun towing vehicles, and as you see one of the field guns there, and several Jeeps beautifully restored. General lineup of the Tigers, and these fellows have certainly got these aircraft looking in fine condition this weekend also. The Chieftain pulls up after a low pass across the field. He's doing practice runs for the events tomorrow. Clive Thorne, Robert Thurston, two of our local pilots. Clive will be flying BAT tomorrow, and Robert will be participating with aerial top disc display.
So Tiger Moth with a rubber band round the wrong way. There's Mike Bamford. He'll be doing a briefing for the Saturday flying events, which of course include the competitions for the Tiger Club. And there's a general view now of the Tiger Club members gathering for the briefing. He's obviously thinks he's got it licked anyway. Doug Donaldson having a chat with Doug Watson. And there's a shot of Field Air's helicopter that did quite a lot of TV movie presentation during the weekend.
The briefing gets underway for the flying activities this afternoon, and no doubt these pilots are going to be doing the best they can to take home the cups that are available.
And once Mike's had a go, well then between Bill and I, we'll sort you out on what sort of competitions we intend to run and where. Mike.
Thanks, Tom. Welcome, everybody. I haven't got much to say other than the fact that we've decided that the easy thing as far as all-order aircraft are concerned, and I think that involves most of the Tiger moths, you will fly a right-hand circuit. That is the opposite to all radio-equipped aircraft. When you're flying the right-hand circuit, that you will be opposing on the downwind leg those doing a standard rejoin and letting down from 1,500 feet to join 1,000 on the normal left-hand circuit downwind. The other thing is good safe flying, everybody, and Doug Donaldson wants to know if anybody hasn't got accommodation.
Yeah, okay, well I've got this accommodation sorted out on a cheeky basis as well, if there's an overflow requirement.
The other thing is
we had a fella from the department here. Where's he? No, not you.
A bit of class in the grass as the members get ready to move out to their aircraft for the competitions on the Saturday. Beautiful day for it, and no doubt, as Doug says, they'll be pretty keyed up to see who takes the cups and trophies home from here. Masterton has two participants in this. Is Clive Thorne flying BAT and Bill Dittmer, who'll be flying BCZ. They'll be doing their darndest to keep things at home.
And there we have BSN from Blenheim, getting airborne now.
Beautifully clear sky for these competitions today. Tiger Club have been having competitions since about 1971, and as the years have gone by, more and more cups have been made available by past and present members for different competitions. This BSN entering a spin now as part of its aerobatic routine.
Unfortunately today you won't see the aerobatics to the same advantage that they will be seen tomorrow, because these aerobatics have to be carried out at the regulation safe height, whereas tomorrow the pilots who are taking part will have clearances to come down to 1,000 feet or a little lower. PSN, having completed his aerobatic routine, now makes his landing back on the aerodrome. Quite a picnic type carnival here this afternoon. People laying around enjoying the sunshine, and we're hoping this will be a forerunner of the scene tomorrow. There's Brian Howard, our controller for the weekend, and it looks as they might have had a little problem there, but back to the control van again.
It's Bill Shaw's Delta Hotel Alpha Tiger Moth. Bill's the current president of the Tiger Club, has been president for a number of years now. A good solid Hawke's Bay farmer and a very nice man.
Not quite sure who's flying Bill's Tiger. Clive Thorne will be flying the Tiger in the aerobatic competition, and this could well be Clive Thorne who is doing his routine now.
Looks a bit like Clive's flying there, Doug, with he's rolling off to hold his altitude for a continuous aerobatic routine.
Yes, could well be, Jeff. It looks the mark of Clive Thorne's aerobatics to me. There's a nicely executed barrel roll, Jeff.
It certainly is. This pilot's putting on a marvellous display.
Yes, I only wish we were sure who we're talking about. We might see who it is now, Jeff.
Yes, I think it's Bill Shaw. It doesn't look like... oh, it could be Clive. It's the red checkers arriving en masse from Wigram. They join downwind and just making a straight in approach on 2-4. It's a bit unfortunate that our airstrip still looks a bit like the aftermath of Port Stanley, but hopefully one day we'll get our airfield back to where it was before, Doug.
That's right, Jeff, because these line patches have had to be put in because of our regular airline activity out of here now, and soft patches have developed on the main strip, so there's had to be a certain amount of patching done using lime, but it seems to be quite successful.
That's right. It's very good to see the Air Force arriving. Their participation is eagerly sought by both fellow pilots and the general public. They put on a very, very good display, don't they?
Yes, they certainly do, Jeff, and they've been rather busy over this last month or so. I saw them at Tauranga on January the 6th, and they've competed at Auckland since, and we have them here today. Always a very tidy little unit, the Air Force, even when they're on the ground. And tomorrow you might see a little bit of this coming out with our local formation team from the Wairapanrua Hiniura Club, the Bluebirds. They're quite a precision team in their own right themselves.
And there's actually the number 3 man off that team, Brian Howden, the controls tower. And there's Clive Thorne in BAT, taxiing out. BAT, of course, is owned by Tom Williams, is on long-term hire to the Sport and Vintage Aviation Society.
BAT came to Masterton around about 1953. It was imported from England and put into the air as an aerial top dressing aircraft, and spent several years in that role. It was actually flown by Clive Thorne's brother Colin, and it was not until Tiger Moths became obsolete that it went out of service, and now we have it back as a two-seater again, and still on Masterton. Looks as though Clive let his wheels beat him a little bit there.
Stuart Tankham's Tiger Moth, taxiing out for competitions.
And we have Graham Taylor flying his Tiger. Tiger's up for 2, isn't it, Jeff?
That's right, that's ZKBF.
Bill Shaw's DHA.
Wayne Greaves leading ARJ across there in his immaculately prepared Tiger Moth. And there's Bill Dittmer and BCZ, of course the aircraft that was used in the film Solo. And there's a shot of the Bluebirds returning from their display and taxiing back to the park. Very warm here today. You can see with the doors open on the Tomahawks to let a bit of air through. Not much ventilation on the ground, these aircraft. And of course, after a practice, things are pretty hot. Cub taxiing in while an Oster, I think it is, no, Cessna 172 landing behind. Nicely prepared little 90 horse Cub there, Doug, isn't it?
Certainly is, Jeff. And as the Tiger competitions continue, we will be having arrivals like this during the rest of the afternoon. We hope to see that aircraft full by this evening.
Red Checkers getting rolling on their takeoff for practice. They'll be using parallel grass instead of using runway 06 because of the wide formation they use for takeoff.
And up and over they go in a tight box in a beautifully executed loop.
Coming through here for what looks like the bomb burst, and drifted nicely over the crowd there. Very nice positioning.
And here we have the well-known mirror formation. It's incredible how close these fellows get those two aircraft together.
There's a rejoin for the 5-man formation. The solo man popping himself back in there now. Very neat and precise. The solo man pushes through. I guess it's time to look at this Red Checkers team. They've been in existence for some time now. They actually formed themselves as the Red Checkers in about 1964. Prior to that, of course, they were using Harvards right up till 1977, but prior to 1964, although they had an aerobatic team going, it weren't actually known as the Red Checkers. And then since the air trainer was introduced, they've worked up a team every year except the years that the Air Force removed themselves from public display from 1974 till about 1980. Very pleased to have them back now. This team, of course, comes from Wigram, the Central Flying School instructors, and they're working up well before the season starts and put on an immaculate display.
A new routine that the Red Checkers have recently adopted is at the finale of their display, they land with the smoke still going. The props are not out of balance on these machines, it's just that the way they've been painted as a safety factor, so as that people won't walk into turning props.
Very important here today too, Doug, with the number of people that are wandering around the aircraft.
This is right, Jeff. There's been many serious accidents caused through people walking into propellers, and this certainly highlights the effect of paint on the propellers. And Harvard 1-5 gets airborne for its aerobatic routine. 1-5 is kept at Wigram at the Air Force Museum, and they are regularly bringing it out to air displays now, and it is very pleasing to see it at our show here today. There won't be any shortage of Harvards. We will have about 8 of them in the air tomorrow, hopefully. Up and over in a nicely executed loop. I think he rolled out of that with aileron at the bottom.
Very hard to get a good picture of aerobatics from a TV presentation that we're watching this display through, Doug, isn't it?
It is. If you haven't got a horizon, it's hard to know just where that aeroplane is and what it's doing at a particular time.
This Harvard, which, as Doug was saying, is the Air Force demonstration aircraft from the Wigram Museum, has unfortunately been removed from its flick manoeuvre capability. The Air Force seem to think that if they keep their aerobatics nice and sweet and even as this man's doing here today, they'll get a lot more life out of the aircraft, and although it still has the smoke trail gear on it, it's not being used in the smoke configuration either. Very clean silhouette as it approaches turning to the head-on position. And another good silhouette there as he does a high-speed low run. Terribly strongly built aircraft these, Doug, aren't they?
Yes, they are, Jeff. They are a very robust aeroplane. I found that out through having quite a bit to do with the overhaul of our own Harvard, and they are an incredibly strong aeroplane. And now in for a nice 3-point landing.
Very nicely done. Welcome to Sunday the 29th of January 1984 to New Zealand's first Vintage and Classic Air Pageant, and organised of course by the New Zealand Sport and Vintage Aviation Society under the control of President Ewan Mackay, with able assistance from Doug Donaldson and Mike Bamford and many other members.
Well, this is the day that we've been waiting for, and it looks as though the weather's at this stage. There are threatening clouds around, but we've all got our fingers crossed that this show will go ahead as planned. The public, as you can see, are rolling into the grounds, and we have a fantastic collection of aircraft here today, and they're still arriving.
It looks like by the time everybody's here we should have something around about 180 aircraft, Doug.
It's certainly looking good at this time, Jeff.
And now we're moving towards the briefing for the day's display flying, and Mike Bamford will be controlling the briefing. Doug Watson and the Air Force boys waiting anxiously to see where their time slot is and how everything's going to be planned. Briefing is held in Motor Holdings hangar, and a good venue for it. Briefings are always a bit of a dogma at air shows, and this looks like everybody's very keen and ready to listen to hear what's happening.
For the Sport and Vintage Aviation Society to rebuild the Domineer and other vintage aircraft which we have. And I think I'd like to introduce first of all Ewan Mackay here, who's president of the society.
Yeah, well, this is the first opportunity I'd like to say thanks very much to Masterton coming here and helping to make this beautiful weekend. We've been sort of thinking and kicking the wheels for going on for a couple of years to, do we attempt a thing of this size? We're, pretty thin on the ground with members down, or active members down around here in the Wairarapa. We've only got a city of about, not even a city of 20,000.
Turn the page now to the actual flying time display timetable. I think that's the part that we're going to be really involved with here. We'll run briefly through the display timetable. Any questions at all, don't hesitate to ask. After we've run through this, I'm going to require the various groups, such as the Tiger Moths, the Harvards, Osters, and Cubs, etc., all those with Osters and Cubs, etc., discuss your plan in regards to what you're going to do for your part in the display, and then as soon as you've got your act sorted out, to let me know exactly what you intend to do. You'll see your time are either around about 10 minutes for the Tigers, plus the takeoff, the Osters, etc. You've got about 5 minutes after your takeoff, that's your takeoff rather, and then you've got your fly cast taking about another 5 minutes. And is that each group will start off in the park here, your aircraft. If you're not on radio, we're going to have a start marshal to make sure that it gives you the signal to start. The important thing is to make sure that you are at your aircraft well before that start time. Now, those with radios, I want you to switch them on to 1181. and you will get the order to start on that frequency. Now, if there's anybody who can't make it from the start time to the position for takeoff on the runway that I've given you there as the display start time, then please let me know. In most cases you've got 10, 8 or around about 10 minutes from your start time, which will taxi out your run-up and your takeoff, or position for takeoff, and then you'll take off at your appointment. Parallel trip for all landing. So what we can do is we can form those groups that are going to be taken off. You can actually form up on the runway, on the takeoff runway, in your formations. Once you've done that, you can change over to 1191 and you will get the order to take off. Do you want this or that? Down right? If you touch hand, just squeeze it just a fraction and move on as far as hold after landing, and then we'll, as soon as the runway is clear, and you'll get the signal to cross. So try and finish your landing run somewhere approximately in the middle there. The taxiway is fairly well opposite. Hold there, then as soon as you get the order, quickly cross and return to your aircraft park and get the aircraft parked and switched off as soon as possible.
So where the parallel taxiway signal is using 06.
Yeah. Fine, thanks Jeff. Aircraft proceeding to takeoff will come down here and then can taxi along the edge here. Now if the runway is clear, because we're not using it for landing, in a lot of cases it would be easier and quicker to backtrack down the vector itself.
You got wings and assistance down far in the runway?
No, we haven't got it. Well, can we get it organised? Can the Tiger Club, you're the main ones involved, don't you? I think the Tiger Club themselves can get that organised, don't you, Bill? Thank you. All right, now the hard-on formation and arrows. You've got that. Is Trevor here? Not yet. John Adams going to lead. Immediately following the briefing at this stage, the hard-on team can form up and you can sort out what you're going to do. Osters, cups, etc. All these people with osters and cups, in other words high wings, type aircraft, form up over back in that far corner over there and get somebody organised there to sort out what you're going to do. Where are the parachutes? We've got the parachutists here?
No, they're not here yet. They're coming over with the train.
Recognise him, he's got blue cloth hat on over there. He takes that off. All right. Okay, I think that's it. Any questions? Oh, the helicopters is in charge of. Okay, Kat. Right. You group together. You happy on that one? Yep. Right. Right, disperse into your groups now. Discuss what you're going to do and let me know what you're going to do. One or two other points. Please keep the time as strictly according to this as you possibly can. Thank you.
Yep, okay.
Well, with the briefing over, our thoughts briefly turn to food. Next to drink, one of the most important things at an air show, and thanks go to Aero Club members and wives for putting in a tireless effort to feed literally hundreds of members and guests. And now 1400 hours and right on cue, fuel's burning and props are turning, and 6 Harvards coming through to open the show for this afternoon.
Yes, Jeff, we can say now the show's on the road, and here's hoping that that weather stays kind. It's looking rather ominous at the moment.
Derek Williams working very hard there to hold formation. Obviously A bit of a change from his ag operation in Tauranga.
Yes, with 7 Harvards passing overhead, this is the grand opening of the show, and it's most impressive. Harvards are not new to Masterton, as during the war years we had a 41 squadron was formed and was based here in Masterton, and it was quite a regular sight to have these aircraft flying day after day during those years.
Slight amendment on that, Doug. That's 14 Squadron. I think some of the old Air Force swallows might be upset to think it was 41 Squadron.
Yeah, sorry Jeff, slip of the tongue.
Classic line astern shot there of the Harvards returning for yet another pass, with certainly what looks like an ominous build-up in the east there.
The Harvards we have taking part in this fly past are, of course, the Sport and Vintages Aviation Society's own Harvard 33, and we have Harvards from Auckland, War, owned by Trevor Bland, and 2 from Tauranga, and the others are syndicate or privately owned Harvards from the Auckland area. We also have Rex Brereton from Ahakia in his immaculately kept Harvard.
Very expensive aircraft to operate and maintain, the Harvard, for a private owner, and it brings to mind the amount of enthusiasm and dedication that these chaps have for their aircraft. Not only, of course, the Harvard, but for all the participating aircraft here today. Absolutely great for New Zealand aviation to have so many willing and capable people who are prepared to put these aircraft in the sky and display them for us.
Now, as soon as the Harvards have landed, it's nice takeoff with the Oscars and Cup.
Yes, that is right, Jeff. They're certainly not a cheap aircraft to operate, and to think that these dedicated airmen have kept these aircraft in the air for the enjoyment of the public is a wonderful tribute to them.
It's a nice 4-point head station roll there with nothing going at the bottom. The wind's getting quite blustery now. It's up to about 15, gusting up to 20 knots from the east, not really suiting any vector in use. Robert Thurston's rolling for his top dressing display. Robert's a very experienced pilot, been in Masterton for many years now, doing an early dump to get a clean rotation, and there's the effect of the crosswind coming in there now. Robert's one of 6 very experienced ag pilots based in Masterton, and I guess most of them would be keen to be out there doing what he's doing today. Not very often they get an opportunity to put on a display in front of a large crowd, and there he is doing a sewing run. Typical Thurston type manoeuvre. And now demonstrating the slow flying capabilities, and again the crosswind's very, very apparent.
Yes, this wind has certainly got quite strong at this time, and I'm rather hoping that it doesn't interfere too much with our displays later on. We have the Tiger Moths, and because that's going to be the highlight of our show today, having these old aircraft performing, and this wind could make it awkward for the pilots.
Very apparent the aileron movement in that aircraft with its very lazy ailerons. It's massive deflection to get any movement out of it, isn't it?
Yes, this is right, Jeff. Of course, they're much more highly developed now than the original old 225 Fletcher, and a lot more controllable. At one time, you used to have a very strong arm to fly one of these aircraft.
I wouldn't mind 10 cents for every tonne that Fletchers have put on in this country, Doug. They've certainly been a boon to hill country farming, haven't they?
Yes, Jeff, that would be right. It's always a crowd pleaser to see an aerial top dressing display. It's a fairly common sight over the rural parts of New Zealand these days, but it still never ceases to be of interest to the general public. And as you can see by the amount of people along the side of the runway there now, this aircraft is certainly holding their interest.
Robert's approaching now for a very short landing, kicking it straight and dropping on and holding short. And there he is, a master taxiing home. This is Stuart Tantrum in the SE5 putting on a low-level aerobatic display. Oh, I'm sorry, that's John Lanham in Stuart Tantrum's SE5, and he puts on a very precise display with this aircraft, considering that it has a never exceed of around about 87 knots, which doesn't give him much speed to get continuous aerobatics, but he usually opens with a spin. We'll see what happens here. Beautifully built little replica of this aircraft. John Lanham and Stuart Tantrum are in the process of building a Fokker triplane to full scale with a D-rated Continental radial engine in it, and it's hoped that they'll be using these two aircraft for a dogfight routine for air shows in the future. We look forward to it.
Yes, that will certainly be a crowd pleaser when John and Stuart can put that act on, Jeff.
Certainly, this aircraft, it just looks exactly the part for the First World War, doesn't it?
Yes, it certainly does. It's built to perfection. It's just a shame that it's not full size.
Yes, apparently the Fokker triplane is quite a small aircraft, so that the difference in size won't be very apparent when the aircraft are together.
Oh well, we can look forward to the day that we do see them together anyhow.
John will be performing again this afternoon using the Society's Harvard 3-3, and he's also commanding officer of Strike Wing 75 Squad at Ohakia, and a very keen pilot, a pilot to the last page in his logbook. He's always interested in what's going on in aviation, and he'll fly anything that he can get his pants into aircraft wise.
John's doing a series of steep turns just above the ground at the moment, and of course he's really got the interest of the crowd at the moment.
Blustery conditions are becoming more apparent, and people putting on a bit more warm clothing there. We just hope this doesn't deteriorate, as Doug says, and hope that the pageant can continue to be the success that it's certainly starting out to be. A close-up view of the SE5 with the lacing on the fuselage sides, which has been absolutely immaculately done. Stuart Tampa to be congratulated. And there's the Bluebirds taxiing out to do their formation demonstration. Jeff Griffiths leading, and Hugh Maxwell, local Tauru farmer, he's in number 2, and Brian Howard, who is a well-known clubman and he is also the controller for the weekend, he's flying number 3.
These 3 pilots have already won the Central Area Rally and will be representing the Wairapinrua Hini Era Club at the RNZAC pageant at Timaru in March, isn't it, Jeff?
Yes, that's right. We hope that we can pull it off down there. These 2 wingmen that I've flown with for some time are both very, very experienced and very comfortable to fly with. It's noticeable that you don't have any worries with these 2, and all fairly clean off the ground together. The wind plays havoc with the Tomahawks, just with the comparison of using the Cherokee as a lead aircraft and so much heavier. And here's rolling back in for the crossover, and the timing there looks pretty good, and they'll be the wingmen will be forming back round on the Cherokee for a Vic pass towards the camera. Returning back in Vic, and we'll be going to line astern shortly for a line astern pass in the turn in front of the crowd. Very nicely done. Once we got a bit of altitude, the winds weren't that apparent. It was only close to mechanical turbulence, close to the ground, that was giving us a bit of a problem. Now going to echelon starboard, and they'll be turning right shortly in front of the crowd, and then a break to the left. Starting the turn now. Very difficult manoeuvre for number 2 and number 3, because they're on the inside of the turn. There's the brake now. Normally we'd be looking at a Vic landing off this, but with the crosswind conditions, it's decided that we'll do a stream landing. Cessna taxiing out with the door removed is of course to do parachute drop.
And there we are, another tidy exhibition by the Birds.
Quite an expensive but a very rewarding competition type of flying to do this, because it involves a team and everybody has to pull the weight the same as one man down, the whole team's down, and 3 up, and we're in business.
As I remarked in the earlier part of the program, the Bluebirds taxi in tight positioning there, as the Air Force do with their red checkers.
There's a beginning of a helicopter handling display with 3 Hughes 300s moving across there now. Andrew Buchanan and Ted Penny and Hallett Griffin, and Hallett returning to do a solo demonstration. Hallett owns his own ag business in Palmerston North, operates out of Fielding, and he operates this Hughes 300 and a Beaver, which is flown by Colin Sutherland, and he's in the process of purchasing an ag cat from the United States, which he will be operating mainly in the spraying role. I understand it's being fitted with Micron air gear. And Hallett's a very experienced pilot, both fixed wing and rotary. Puts on a very, very smooth display with the Hughes 300. He's very keen to participate in air shows. It's a very pleasant chap, Hallett, and always willing to please. I actually saw him fly from Fielding to Nelson to do a display at an air show, and then the pageant organisers scrubbed him from the program, and being the good man that he is, he just shrugged it off and didn't seem to worry too much.
Well, that was just a very interesting manoeuvre that Hallett did then. He was pivoting on the tip of the port skid, had pivot control over the helicopter, and then slid along the ground on the leading edge, on the lead of both skids, just as though he was taxiing the aircraft along the ground. Hughes 300 is a very popular little helicopter. I don't know how many of them are in New Zealand, but they've been very popular and versatile little helicopter. They're used in gear recovery, agricultural operations, and the training role.
Of course, the training role in Masterton is carried out by Kath and Ted Penny. Kath does most of the training, and Ted uses the helicopter in out-of-season conditions for spraying. I remember seeing a sign dug in a hiller once which said this aircraft is not to be flown in prolonged rearward flight, and I remarked to the pilot about this sign, and I said to him, why is that? And he said, well, sooner or later if you fly it backwards you're bound to run into something. Which seemed quite sensible, I suppose.
Yes, I would agree that that's probably a sound philosophy in that, Jeff.
There's a parachute drop. These are members of the Wellington Skydiving Club under Ian Drinkwater's supervision, and using, of course, the modern Paravane, which is a very manoeuvrable type of parachute. You can move forward, I think, at about 19 knots and very, very controllable, the rate of descent and the direction of travel. And just to demonstrate the capability, that parachutist there is moving his around very easily.
Unfortunately, our deteriorating weather has caused the parachute display to be shortened. We only have 2 jumpers, but we were originally going to have 6. They were going to jump from various heights, but the cloud base has caused the cancellation of this, and we only have 2 parachutists now.
And there's the effect of the strong easterly wind blowing there. There's a dog rushing out to give him a hand.
It's coming down vertically in spite of the wind.
Now we have the pit special, EEU, flown by Keith Trillo. Keith, of course, is well known in the aviation circles. He is a Boeing 747 captain, and he comes from Auckland. EEU, as I said, is a pit special, very much liked by pilots for aerobatic routines, and indeed world championships have been won using this type of aircraft. The other pits that went off ahead of Keith is a 2-seat pits, and it's flown by John Luff from Wanganui. The aircraft was built in Paraparaumu, and John bought the aircraft some 12 months ago, and he's developed an aerobatic routine. And even though he was not originally going to fly here today, Keith Trillo has agreed that John should share the aerobatic display with him. So we are looking forward to something good from these 2.
Keith Trillo will be well remembered in past years for operating his Avro Avian, which he rebuilt to perfection. It was unfortunately lost in a fire in a shed in Wanganui in 1973, I think. But Keith's aerobatics in that aircraft were beautiful, and the aircraft had a great history itself. It was went right back to the Chichester Company.
And there we have John Luff performing a, well, he went into a loop, but he's now flying off inverted. He's now he pushed through, but we've got him at a different angle now.
Obviously a very strong aircraft, Doug. They're powered 180 horsepower, aren't they?
I think it's 180 horsepower, Jeff, yes.
Certainly have a massive rate of climb off the ground. They look like they're going up about 2,000 feet a minute. Sparkling little aeroplane, aren't they?
That is right, and think of the G when they're doing some of these outside manoeuvres.
Certainly is. It's also very fast, isn't it?
It is.
Just a pity with the overcast conditions that the smoke is not quite as effective as it certainly would be under a blue sky, but it's obviously a very effective smoke system that he's operating there, because it's pushing out quite a solid stream, isn't it?
That's right, there. And we just saw a perfectly executed 8-point hesitation roll in. Now we have a stall turn. And into a half aileron roll.
There's the classic pose of the pits. Violent flick manoeuvres, just seems to zap round without any effort at all. Looked like a double outside snap there.
Very fast and very precise.
Vertical roll. Stall turn to the right. And pushes through in 30.
These little aircraft have really changed the aerobatic scene in New Zealand as far as competition is concerned. I noticed the Royal New Zealand Air Club plumping for a change in aerobatic categories so that special high performance aircraft such as the Pitts will be in a separate class, and aircraft such as the Beagle Pup and Cetabrias and Air Tours will be in the normal Aero Club class.
Vertical roll. Stall turn left. Downward snap. Flick roll.
Knife edge run showing the outline of the aircraft to the crowd. Well, he has to be forgiven there. They were very hard aircraft to land, and especially the crosswind conditions today. And also coming in on that end of the runway, we've got a few bumps that we keep there, especially for people from out of town.
I'm just flying in formation with this aeroplane about 50 yards out from it.
Thanks.
South Island, and then turn and went back across the strait in 30. Never once in the whole time. I think it was upside down for about 30 minutes. Which proves that this little aeroplane...
Well, Keith's now completed and he's returning to the park. And John Lanham's taxiing out in Harvard 33, taxiing past Bill Dittmer's Tiger. And John will be putting on an aerobatic routine in the Society's Harvard. Perhaps you might like to just tell me what the power settings are that he'll be using for takeoff here, Doug.
Yes, Jeff. Well, for takeoff, you are normally in full fine pitch, which will give you 2275 RPM, and boost will be taken up to 36 inches normally, but because our field is so large, John has probably only used about 30 inches there. Immediately gets airborne, he throttles back to 230 inches if he has used more than that, and brings the pitch back to 2000 RPM. That is a power setting which you can then comfortably climb with, and indeed that's a power setting he will be using in his aerobatics that you'll be viewing now.
Puts on a very nice display of aerobatics, John, in the Harvard, considering he doesn't fly the aircraft very often. He has, of course, flown Harvards many times in the past. I think he has about 12 or 1400 hours up, both in the front and back seat. And he was a member of the Red Checkers on Harvards for 2 years, and 1 year, I think, was the solo exponent in the Red Checkers. And when you're using 36 inches for takeoff, Doug, is that supplying 600 horsepower, or is that would it be lower than that?
No, you'd be getting around about the 600 there, Jeff.
And the fuel consumption up there would be pretty high too, I suppose, would it?
Yes, at those power settings, you're using around about 40 gallons an hour or a little more.
Well, I hope he doesn't stay up there very long.
Yes, good job he's not paying for it. Interestingly enough, John learnt to fly in the with the RAF, and he flew initially on Jet Provosts. He never flew Harvards until he came back to New Zealand, and he didn't like the thought of it to start with, but he found it such a delightful aeroplane to fly that you'd never get him away from one if there was one available to fly now.
He certainly he flies it very beautifully. A mark of John's capabilities as a pilot, I think, showed up very well at Whenuapai last year when the Air Force worked up a Skyhawk aerobatic team, and John led that, and the choreography of that team was something to be seen, to be believed. I've seen a few good formation teams here and overseas, and that was the best I've ever seen. Unfortunately, it was disbanded at the end of the year, which I guess would have been a disappointment to John, but it was a fantastic display.
Harvard 3-3 in the colour scheme of the 1950s, or yes, around about the 1950s. Of course, when it went into storage in 1956, it remained in those colours, and we decided not to change them. It's quite a distinctive colour scheme.
Well, there's only two Harvards in New Zealand operating in this colour scheme. That's 2-5 from Timaru. I agree with it. I think it looks a very pleasant colour scheme. And now over to you for the Tiger demonstration.
Well, yes, here we are at the highlight of our show today. We had hoped to have 20 Tiger Moths here, but we have 17, and we have 16 of them actually taking part in this fly past today. This is, as I said, is to be the highlight of our show, and it has been well publicised, and this is what the public have come to look at. These boys are taking off in quite a strong crosswind, but they are all coping quite adequately at this stage. BSN from Blenheim preceded by BAT, and there we have ALX. The Tigers will do a circuit, and they're going to group up in Vics of 3 with a Vic of 4 at the back to giving us our 16 Tiger Moths. And there they are there now. In our view, quite an impressive sight, and this will certainly make some of the older airmen here today have nostalgic memories. Considering these wind conditions and these fellas haven't had a practice together, they are holding remarkably good Vics.
That is a phenomenal sight, Doug, isn't it?
Absolutely fantastic, Jeff.
Brian Howard busy at the control, and probably holding aircraft out while we've got an auto aircraft working at the moment.
This wind has got quite strong, Jeff, and I'm not sure how these Tigers are going to cope with getting back on the ground, but still we can only hope that it doesn't present too many problems for them. There we have our 16 Tiger Moths coming overhead now, and that familiar sound of 16 Gypsy Majors purring away is absolutely wonderful. Alan Land, of course, is here in the newest Tiger Moth on the register again. He bought A&Q at Tauranga recently off, I think it's Don Scrivener, and he went to a lot of effort, and he has it here for the show. Now the Tigers are making their landings, but they're approaching on 06, and they are doing a right-hand turn on the deck and actually landing on 10 to get themselves into wind. They're doing a wonderful job getting them down, and it all looks to be quite safe at this stage. BRB with Bruce Coulter at the controls just landed then.
Combination of bad wind and also a strange aerodrome for these people. The whole thing's a bit, wow, that's a bit different, isn't it?
Well, that's John Crosby. He's down safely though.
He's a very enthusiastic Tiger Club member from Auckland, isn't he?
That is right. John is from Auckland, and he has an interest in 2 tiger moths. I think that is Neville Worsley in
Brian Rankin's
BSV.
too.
Yes, from Palmerston North. Graham Taylor. BSN from Blenheim again.
He's full of confidence, putting it down 3-point.
Yes, nice landing.
Oh, great display by these chaps. Considering the conditions, they are the type of man that pageant pilots are made of, aren't they?
Yes, a wonderful display, Jeff. Full credit to those fellows doing that in these wind conditions. As you can see, they are all having to have wingtip assistance back to the parking area. Clive Thorne and BAT.
Notice Clive's wearing his old top dressing helmet with the leather extension at the back, or the chamois extension to stop the super running down his neck. He must have had that for a few years, Doug.
Yes, you're right, Jeff, and it is his old top dressing helmet. I've seen it. And there's Bill Dittmer and BCZ. And John Crosby and AKC. Bruce Coulter and BRB, a beautifully restored tiger moth from Auckland. And we have Wayne Greaves from Gisborne and Bravo Alpha Lima.
The well-known Biggles.
That is correct. In the background there we had Graham Taylor.
This is Colin Sutherland and Griffin Aguirre's Beaver. He unfortunately was held out for some time while Nordo aircraft were landing, and so he's returned to do a very short display for the crowd. Unfortunately not the full display that he had planned, but he must have burnt a few dollars worth of fuel sitting out waiting. Very experienced pilot, Colin. Flown Thrush Commanders, and then with Field Air in Gisborne he was flying Beavers until he left to join Griffin Aguirre, and Hallett Griffin has bought this Beaver for him to operate. I noticed, Doug, its registration BDI. It was registered CPZ at some stage of its life. What's its history?
Well, that's right, Jeff. It was CPZ when it was owned by Field Air, but prior to that the aircraft was originally registered in New Zealand as BDI, went to Australia and flew under Australian registration for several years, and then when it was repurchased by Field Air, it became CPZ, and now Hallett has got its old registration allocated back to it again.
I was discussing with Colin Sutherland one day about different aircraft, and we were talking about the Chrisley Ace, and Colin's a very keen pilot to fly any aircraft, and he said the Chrisley Ace was the only aeroplane that he'd ever flown that he really didn't want to fly again. So it doesn't say much for the aeroplane, does it?
Quite incredible. I haven't heard that before, Jeff, but I've seen the Chrisley Ace fly, and it seems to perform quite nicely. Be anxious to get our one back in the air and see how it goes.
Certainly. I think we should put him in there just to give it its first test flight when it goes.
Well, Colin Sutherland, of course, owns his own Tiger Moth, and we've been waiting for some years to see that in the air, so hopefully it won't be too long before he has his Tiger flying as well.
Wairarapa Airlines Navajo's rolling, piloted by Jeff Sayers and capably assisted by Dave Atkinson, and they'll be doing a high-performance short-field takeoff here with a fairly high-speed ground run beforehand, gears coming up, and the crosswinds becoming effective, and they'll be climbing out to do a slow run, a fast run, and an asymmetric run. Jeff Sayers hasn't been flying for Wairarapa Airlines very long, but here he shows his capabilities in an extremely low, high-speed run with the Navajo, everything flat chat. A very nice display there, very crisp. Wairarapa Airlines have been operating out of Masterton for about 4 years with this aircraft, and they have in the course of their life been taken over by Hansels. Mr. John Munsell, who's patron of the Wairarapa and Ruhini Aero Club, now owns the airline, and they are, I think, the third airline to operate out of Masterton. We had Sky Travel and then Spans, and then NAC took over for a wee while before they disbanded the service, and it's very good to have a local service operating through here now. And there's a low speed run with everything hanging out.
And there we have Jeff going past with one prop full feathered in another low speed run. And it just goes to show that these aircraft have a built-in margin of safety when you can fly them through at that height on one engine.
And coming in for a fairly short landing, putting that nice interwind main on the ground first, and quite heavy braking there, Doug. The nose wheel seems to be pretty well distended.
Yes, I would say Jeff's turned that into a real short landing for us. He wouldn't be far past the control tower there. Actually, he's turning in onto the temporary taxiway which we've put in for the pageant, so that was a short landing.
And here's one of two Dominis that are left in New Zealand. This one is owned by Dave Gray from Ardmore, and he'll be putting on a display for us. The other aircraft, of course, is the Society's Domini, which is currently under rebuild under the capable hands of Ted Ashwell, who's very generously putting a lot of time into it. And we're very lucky to have Ted's capabilities, because woodworkers are very hard to find now, Doug, aren't they?
Yes, this is right, Jeff. Very pleasing to see Dave Gray's Domini here today. It has not been back in the air very long. It was unfortunately severely damaged in a landing mishap at Te Kauai some 4 years ago at a fly-in, and they were flying in very similar conditions as to what we've got here today, a crosswind, and unfortunately the Domini, not having the best of braking systems, veered off the runway into a ditch and did very severe damage.
And Dave Gray's getting airborne now in AKU. This aircraft, of course, has a very extensive history in that it flew from London to Sydney in an air race some years ago under the sponsorship of Rothmans, whose colours still appear there. And Dave flew it from New Zealand across to London to fly this air race home again. And there's a beautiful air-to-air shot of the Domini showing those de Havilland wing lines. Very pretty old aeroplane. Very nice to ride in, Doug, isn't it?
Beautiful aeroplane to ride in, Jeff. I unfortunately have never flown it, but I have flown in it on a flight to Paraparaumu, and it was sheer magic.
Yeah, very unusual sight. The Domini in formation with the Mark V Proctor of Frank Britton's. Frank's ex-president of the Royal New Zealand Aero Club and past president and current president of the Middle District Aero Club. And that Mark V Proctor is the only one flying apparently in the world, according to the airshow commentator today, Peter Strugnell. And also it's got a local history too, Doug, hasn't it?
Yes, that's right, Jeff. ARP was purchased by the local Aero Club back around about 1947, I think, and it spent its first years in New Zealand here at Masterton.
Well, that's a nice high-speed run with the Domini.
Yes, it certainly is a graceful looking aeroplane, Jeff. And here's AKU being set back on the ground by Dave Gray. Lovely wheeler landing.
Very soft undercarriage. I know Bob Cranston's mentioned to me that it's a very soft, spongy undercarriage.
Yes, that and its big tyres, Jeff, would certainly give it a very soft landing characteristics. As I was saying, ARP was owned by the local Era Club, and Frank restored it some years ago into the beautiful aeroplane it is now. It's still very similar to in appearance to what it was when it first came out here, but it's a lovely aeroplane, and that beautiful sound of that Gypsy Queen, it's a very familiar sound.
Well, here's the red checkers getting airborne for their display, and I think today, Doug, will just leave it to the red checkers to show us what they can do.
Yes, I agree.
Also a helicopter pilot, presently a helicopter instructor at Central Flying School at Wickham.
Radars from Bristol floaters and helicopters taking up the present post as an instructor at pilot training school.
Well, sitting in the smoke haze from the red checkers is the Struckmaster, the BAC Struckmaster, waiting to roll for its display. One of two aircraft that arrived from Ahakia today, and the other one's on static display, and there he is rolling with the Bristol Siddeley Viper being cranked up to full power, and he'll be fairly light, no doubt, and pretty early off the ground.
These aircraft are the jet aircraft, training aircraft for 14 Squadron, who are Ahakia based, and we quite regularly have them in our skies over the Wairarapa.
Very nice little aeroplane this for a tricycle undercarriage, side-by-side seating. Excellent trainer. It's, of course, a very old design. Started with a piston engine in the first airframe, and it's just evolved into the Struckmaster. We're operating, I think, 14 of these aircraft, and they're in wide use throughout the world. Still used as a basic trainer by the RAF under the name of Jet Provo. And at one stage they were used in one of the leading RAF aerobatic teams too, I think called the Yellow Pelicans, I think. This Air Force pilot flying this aircraft today put on absolutely immaculate display. He's very, very precise, and they're starting to do things with these aircraft that they haven't done before, with pushing and bunting and a flick roll. I think he's going to do a nozzle twizzle a bit later on. It's a 14 Squadron from wartime experience here today, and I guess they'll be looking at the comparison of the aircraft they were flying in 14 Squadron during the war years and this aircraft today. Quite an uncomplicated aircraft, I think, but obviously a lot more potent than the aircraft they were flying in those days. Very clean design, clean outlines as shown there. And here's an undercarriage loop with everything coming out at the top. The 14 Squadron actually worked up a formation team with these aircraft in 1973 or early 74, and unfortunately before they displayed, the Air Force were put into public mothball by the government with the fuel crisis that came on at that time. It would have been interesting to see a formation team operated by these aircraft. They'd be formed very well, I'd say. Many of the local critics watching a very polished display.
Yes, I think with a display like this, Jeff, there wouldn't be much criticism from our local sideline critics.
No, that's quite right, Doug. It can only be applause, can't it?
This is right. The cloud base now is as low as it's been all day, and you know, this fellow is turning on a quite an immaculate display with the low ceiling. Of course, we're anxiously awaiting the arrival of the Skyhawk. And that has had to be delayed because our pageant has got a little bit behind due to the weather conditions that have prevailed upon us, and he is some 20 minutes late, or the program is some 20 minutes late, so he has been held back, but he shouldn't be too far away now.
I think someone did say that he's holding to the north.
And there we have 1-5. The Air Force's Harvard has just completed a loop, and certainly a nice aeroplane.
must be hoped by most of the aviation public in New Zealand that the Air Force Wigram Museum get more of their aircraft in the air. 155 is the only aircraft they have flying or flyable, but they do have a lot of aircraft there which in time will be very nostalgically looked on if they can get them into flying condition, Doug.
Yes, and of course we're all anxiously awaiting the day that the Avro 626 goes into the air. It's at Hakia at the moment, under restoration, and I've recently seen it, and it is going to be a beautiful aeroplane when it goes into the air. There's the Harvard and another low run across the field.
The smoke gear off the extended exhaust pipe is very apparent when he's doing his turn there. As I mentioned earlier, he's not using smoke. Apparently it's a decision made by the Wigram Museum.
Yes, well, of course we've lost the full effect of the smoke today with the heavy overcast that we have here.
A nice high-speed pass. And 1-5 touching down and touching down again and completing his part of the display, and very nice it was. A Cessna trying to depart, but this man says he's not going to. Dive breaks out, and after a high-speed run goes into a very steep 75-degree probably angled bank and comes around for another run. The Skyhawks, of course, from 75 Squadron Ohakia, and as I said, he's been holding to the north and awaiting his turn to do a run-in and do a very hot display. The noise on both these aircraft is courtesy of Pratt & Whitney, but one's pushing a lot more air out than the other.
There we have the hot Skyhawk coming past with all the gear down. Flaps, undercarriage, and a slow pass.
Very strong aeroplane, these Skyhawks, of course, designed for carrier operations. They have a rate of descent onto the ground in excess of 1,000 feet a minute. And the wing, I understand, is milled out of a solid block of aluminium. It must be very, very strong. As the Skyhawk continues to display, Doug and I are looking back at the last 2 days, and of course the preceding 8 or 9 months of preparation that this pageant has entailed, and the amount of work that Hugh and Mackay and Doug and Mike Bamford and many others have put in to make this a successful display. A very difficult display to organise because it's the first of its kind in New Zealand, and participation is very hard to get with costs of aircraft operation the way they are. So the turnout that has been here is phenomenal, and it'll go down in history as probably the biggest vintage aircraft display that's been held in New Zealand for some time, and we hope that in another 3 or 4 years we may be able to do it again. We certainly look forward to entertaining the public and to having these old aircraft filling the skies of Masterton. Nice uncluttered airspace that we have here, and a beautiful grass airfield. We've got the facilities, and it's up to us to bring them back again. So this is Jeff Griffith saying thanks for being with us.
And Doug Donaldson would like to add his thanks too. Our thanks go to all the participating pilots who have attended our show this weekend, and without them we couldn't have made this show possible, and we wish them all a most successful and pleasant journey home.